We recognize that the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect the Abenaki's spiritual relationship to the land, and we seek to honor their living traditions. We hope to learn from them how we can respect Mother Earth and each other.
Good morning, and wow. Oh, just talk about set the tone. Absolutely beautiful. Welcome to Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society's online Sunday service. I am Esther Thomas, a member of this congregation. I will be serving as the worship associate for our minister, the Reverend Barnaby Feeder. This morning, we will reflect on how UU's values can help us make good choices. If this is your first time joining us, please check out our website and email us so we can tell you more about CVUUS and put you on our weekly email blast. The best way to stay in touch with all the many activities going on at CVUUS is to read the weekly email blast. Thank you, Laura. You'll find many pathways to connections there. If you have a milestone or passage today, you may put it in the chat if you haven't sent it to us already. And of course, please join us for our Zoom coffee hour at the end of this service. We want to thank all those who collaborated to make this service possible. Thank you. Our call to worship today is by Jim Scott. For all of life and gifts we hold sacred, we raise our voices. For all our relations, we will meet with compassion and grace. We raise our voices. For justice and peace and the health of all the cycle of life, we raise our voices. For the celebration of all who themselves cannot or may not, we raise our voices. For this moment in time that we are granted to share the wealth of each other's presence, we raise our voices. For the power of our collective voice and concerted action with vision and love, we raise our voices. And now it is time for our chalice lighting, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Please join me in reading the words on the screen. Community is the spirit, the guided light of the tribe, whereby people come together in order to fulfill a specific purpose, to help others fulfill their purpose, and to take care of one another.
Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. And may we walk in peace. Let us open our hearts beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what
Good morning. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see everybody. We come every Sunday, but it's always by YouTube, so we don't see. We are relocating, all right. We're finding our bearings about 2,300 miles away. Scary? Yes. Exciting? Yes. Sad? Yes. Crazy? Yes. The right decision? Yes. This is called adventure, was a line from a reading last week during the coming of age credo statements. If you missed that service, which was so thoughtful, so authentic, so brave, so hopeful, please watch it or watch it again, because it is all about the kids. This is what Richard said to me when we talked about creating this message. Whether it is CVUUS religious exploration or our families, it is who we want to hang out with. It is all about the kids. So we are moving to Montana to be closer to our kids. But back to Ari. Margot, my mom, she did it. Richard, my husband, he did it. Me, I did it. My mom did it when she and my dad, Walter, helped start a UU fellowship way back in the 60s. She is 96 years young. And do you know that one of the kids in her RE class was Dorothy Mammon? But she says she wishes she had learned from Poppy beforehand because of how wonderful she is. You all are really lucky to have her. Richard did it when he joined CVUUS, and we partnered to create the first children's worship program when we went to 2 services every Sunday morning. We had a blast with those kids who are now adults. And I did it because it was where I wanted to be, with the children. I came here in 1988 with my 2-year-old son and stayed in RE for the next 15 years. I had not a clue about what was going on with the adults upstairs, and that was fine. I taught with so many special people, some that are still here today: Catherine, Ann, Rich, Bill, Abby, Mitch, Jordan, Liz, Karen. I could go on. Richard says that CVUUS will be with him as we move to Montana. So here are a few facts that he wanted to share. The abbreviation for Vermont is VT, and it was the 14th state. The abbreviation for Montana is MT, and it was the 41st state. Vermont is French for Green Mountain State. Montana is Spanish for mountain region. The nicknames are Big Sky Country or the best last place. State animal for Vermont is the Morgan horse. For Montana, it is the grizzly bear. State bird for Vermont is Jeesum crow. For Montana, it is the western meadowlark. Vermont population is about 630,000. Montana population is about 1 million. Vermont is not quite 10,000 square miles. Montana is almost 150,000 square miles. And don't tell Margot that it snowed about a foot in the mountains yesterday. Not here, Montana. Always know that it is all about the kids. Our love for you is so powerful that it goes way beyond the mountains, across all the miles, and deeper than any challenges that happen in our lives. So if you are an adult here, because it is all about the kids, it is all about you. It doesn't have to be your own kids. I know our grown children know they can go to the principals or a UU community to find a way, to find a home. We just need to be here for them. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a kid, or was a kid, who died at age 14 named Maddie, but not before he wrote several books of poetry. And his poetry is all about heart songs. And the basic definition he gives to a heart song is, it's what you feel you need to do. You can't always explain it. You can't sing it. It doesn't have to rhyme. It is just that string on your spirit that says, pull here. Years ago, I did a sermon titled Capers in the Cupboard. It was about all those things that I never imagined happening to me. I shared several I never imagined, ... And it was all about how change can be slow or sudden, and how adaptation and resiliency are necessary for our well-being. Back then, I said, I never imagined I would have capers in the cupboard. I explained that up until my life with Richard, I didn't even know what a caper was, much less have them in my cupboard. But now I have them in our cupboards as a backup to the one that's in the refrigerator, just in case, because I like to stock the kitchen with those things that he might need to create magic. And God forbid we run out of capers. Speed forward to today and the pandemic. Can you imagine how many jars of capers we have in the cupboards? Back then, I noted that I never imagined I would divorce. Speed forward to I never imagined I would be in the ICU room with my dying ex-husband, with my daughter Haley bedside, and my son Colin in my hand through FaceTime to carry Danny tenderly home. Back then, I never imagined I would lose my dad suddenly without a chance to say goodbye. Speed forward to today, I never imagined that I would say goodbye with such love and meaning through 14 years of education, hospice volunteer training, advanced care planning facilitation, a chaplaincy program, an end-of-life doula certificate, and a degree in thanatology. I didn't even know what the study of thanatology was a year ago. Some things I do know. I always imagined that Richard and I would create a home together wherever we are. I always imagined that scary things would happen, but we would get through it. I always imagined, from Callie's song last week, that wherever you fly, this isn't goodbye, you are never alone. I always imagined that CVUUS would be with me wherever I go. In closing, here are my new imaginings. I never imagined that I would be moving with Richard, Mom, and 2 dogs to Montana. I never imagined that I would distill my life mantra down to show up and pay attention. That I would not question the what ifs, but would focus on the what is. I never imagined moving 12 jars of capers across the country. I need to quote Mom, because who says it better? I have never found a community whose leaders and members were as dedicated, enthusiastic, compassionate, and just delightful as those in CVUUS. I am so grateful to have been part of this caring, inspiring congregation. And finally, because it is all about the kids, I share Maddie's poem called Facing the Future. Every journey begins with but a small step, and every day is a chance for a new small step in the right direction. Just follow your heart song.
Thank you so much, Lori. Lori is going to be here with Margot through the flower communion, as I understand it. Richard is going to be on the road that day, packed up in the van. I didn't want to wait till the last minute to ask them to give a testimony for all ages, because they have been so important to the congregation since long before I was called as your minister. We're at the time in our program where we have an offering, and the offering this month is being shared with Sandy Hook Promise, a group created to fight gun violence in the wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre in Connecticut. But before we go to our offering, I want to have a special offering to Lori and Richard and Margot from Mike Greenwood. Now, Mike served as co-president with Lori, co-president of our board. And to our knowledge, we hadn't done that before. We certainly haven't done it while I was here, to have co-presidency. And it's a testimony to both Mike and Lori that they made it work. And I asked Mike what would he say, and Mike sent me an excerpt from the opening verse of a Mary Oliver poem called On Losing a House, to which Mike added a new closing line. The bumblebees know where their home is. They have memorized every stalk and leaf of the field. They fall from the air at exactly the right place. They crawl under the soft grasses. They enter the darkness humming, knowing they have found home. And in that spirit, we send you on your way to Montana when you do leave in a few weeks. And we're so grateful we've had a lot of practice with online ministry, because you'll still be able to tune in from Montana anytime you want to get up early enough. So with that, I invite you to our regular offering this week to continue the good work of Sandy Hook Promise in getting reasonable gun laws to reduce gun violence, and especially to protect our children, because as Lori said, it is all about our kids. A final milestone I want to note was the beginning of a truce in Gaza this week. And I want to say that we pray against all odds that we one day be able to look back on this truce as the one that finally held and then blossomed into lasting peace in an era of reconciliation among the diverse cultures laying claim to one small corner of the world. It means so much to all of us when these conflicts persist, and it only makes the goal of peace that much more important. In that spirit, I want to invite you into a time of meditation and prayer to locate where your heart is this morning. And afterwards, we'll come out of that with some music from Ronnie.
There's not a pretty or a handsome that could ever stand in praise or hold a candle to the light I see shining from your face. What no random quirk of nature could ever compromise. The thing that makes you beautiful is in your eyes. There are those who say that beauty is the flower of the day, that it blooms in youth only, and with age will fade away, but enduring as diamonds, more shining than gold. The thing that makes you beautiful cannot grow old. So if ever there's a question, if you're feeling dull and old, won't you let me be your mirror, where the truth is always told? In the eye of this beholder, you're a bright and shining star. The thing that makes you beautiful, the thing that makes you beautiful, the thing that makes you beautiful is the way you are.
As you can see,
My name is Morris Earl, and I'm a member of the CV.
as you can see, that was a little bit more than Ronnie. That was the hospice choir, which Ronnie is leading, and which Lori helped in her work to set up to bring to so many people in Addison County. I wanted to introduce Morris Earl, who's offering this next section. Morris had the misfortune of having a very incompetent person filming him. That was me. And he cut off the last word. The last word, when he gets to the end of his prayer, is you. So I hope you feel very included in it.
Good morning. My name is Morris Earl, and I'm a member of the CVUUS congregation. I worked on the Navajo Nation in Arizona, doing pediatrics, taking care of children this winter. They had a bad time with the COVID virus. Many people do not have running water or electricity and live in close quarters, so it was hard to keep the virus in check. I was woken up at all hours by the sound of helicopters landing to take sick patients to the intensive care unit in Flagstaff. It was a strange contrast to be in the middle of a vast rocky desert, very empty, home to one of the oldest cultures in North America, and every hour all night long hear this thwack, 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 thwack of these mechanical birds landing. I worked in the clinic seeing children who were isolated with the pandemic, but they were glad to see us. The parents were happy to get out of the house and have someone share their happiness about their children. Like people all over the world, there is nothing that Navajo like better than someone who loves their kids. Navajo is a Spanish word which means horse thief, so it is not usually what they call themselves. They are the Diné, which means the people. We also saw Hopi kids. If you are the first person to make a Hopi baby laugh, you have to buy the family a sheep. That can get expensive, buying sheep, so I tried to find out if the babies had laughed yet. There were many children with obesity, poor eating habits, diabetes, tooth decay, diseases of poverty. Families often live crowded in a small manufactured home or hogan, which is a traditional round wooden structure, sometimes daubed with mud. The door of the hogan faces east toward the rising sun. You should enter it walking in a clockwise direction. One mother was homeless, and her cousin was letting her stay in an old trailer. It had no heat or electricity or water. They plugged up cracks and holes with newspaper to keep the cold and snow out. Finding money to feed her kids was a challenge. I saw her a number of times and reminded her what a wonderful job she was doing, keeping her children's lives afloat. People were very friendly, but I felt a big gulf between my life and theirs, a gulf made up of thousands of years of history and hundreds of years of injustice. Stories that they have not forgotten, but I have only read rumors about, from when the white people first came. We are called the Biligana, which means new people. I went back to the Biligana world one day to the supermarket in Flagstaff and heard one of the cashiers talking about the Navajo. A teenager who was bagging groceries asked, "Why are reservations still a thing?" And the cashier said, "It's because they can do whatever they want." But I don't think that's why people live on the reservation or the Navajo Nation. I think they like to be in a place where you are not part of a discounted minority, where you are treated as an equal. They like to be around families and people who understand their culture and their history. They like to stay living between the 4 sacred mountains where they can practice their own religion. The 4 sacred mountains can be seen on this shirt I'm wearing, but I'm not sure it shows up in the camera. This is a traditional Navajo symbol which has the 4 sacred mountains here, and then there's a cow and a sheep and a horse in between, and some ears of corn down below, and the bright sun up above. So they like to be there where they can practice their own religion. believe in the natural things in a place that is still dominated by natural things. It is a magnificent and vast landscape, desert and towering red rocks and mesas, the most inhospitable landscape in America, but also one of the most beautiful, not hidden behind condos and golf courses and shopping centers. There isn't much money, but there's not so much stuff either. I met a Biligana, a white woman who taught Spanish in Tuba City for 30 years at the high school. Every year she raised money to take the kids on a trip to Mexico or Spain in the spring. Many kids had never been to Phoenix, much less outside of Arizona. The school board and the principal fought her about these trips away the whole time. They felt it was taking the kids off the reservation. They might get interested in outside things and not want to come back. Very few kids went to college from the high school, and yet there weren't many jobs available for them. My friends from residency have been there for 30 years. I never asked them why they stayed. I know they feel useful, and they like the Navajo way, which is described in the following poem. With beauty before me, I walk. With beauty behind me, I walk. It begins in beauty, and it ends in beauty. I will speak, and my words will be beautiful. In Navajo, they say ahihi, which means thank you.
Thank you. Oh, beautiful, wonderful. I will be doing our reading. It's a poem called I Wanted to Be Surprised by Jane Hirschfeld. To such a request, the world is obliging. In just the past week, a rotund porcupine who seemed equally startled by me. The man who swallowed a tiny microphone to record the sounds of his body, not considering beforehand how he might remove it. A cabbage and mustard sandwich on marbled bread. How easily the large spiders were caught with a clear plastic cup surprised even them. I don't know why I was surprised every time love started or ended, or why each time a new fossil, Earth-like planet or war, or that no one kept being there when the doorknob had clearly. What should not have been so surprising? My error after error recognized when appearing on the faces of others. What did not surprise enough, my daily expectation that anything would continue, and then that so much did continue when so much did not. Small rivulets still flowing downhill when it wasn't raining. A sister's birthday. Also, the stubborn, courteous persistence that even today, please means please, good morning is still understood as good morning. And that when I wake up, the window's distant mountain remains a mountain. The borrowed city around me is still a city and standing. Its alleys and markets, offices of dentists, drugstore, liquor store, Chevron. Its library that charges, a happy surprise, no fine for overdue books. I can relate. Borhens, Baldwin, Szymborska, Morrison, and convey fees. Forgive me for my pronunciation. Thank you.
The great British mathematician and peace activist Bertrand Russell once warned, "Everything is vague to a degree you don't realize till you have tried to make it precise." He sure got that right when it comes to where I find myself as the pandemic statistics in Vermont get better and better, making the prospect that we can resume large-scale face-to-face activities at CVUUS in the foreseeable future more and more real. Suddenly, a lot of questions that seemed theoretical and easily stated, a lot of questions that I didn't feel required our immediate attention, look different. They have begun to feel more pressing and hard to pin down. Questions like, what technology will allow us to resume our, quote, regular, unquote, worship in our sanctuary while still connecting with people who want or need to participate remotely? Questions like, how do we address the risks that some of us aren't getting vaccinated or live with children not even eligible yet for vaccination? We need to find our bearings. Now, that's not a phrase you hear often, but it makes a lot of sense to me as a way to frame our challenge. Now, when you hear the word bearings, it's often in the context of things like ball bearings. If you think about it, it should be a feel-good word, even though it most commonly pops up in warnings from an auto mechanic that yours need to be replaced. Ball bearings are deceptively simple human inventions that support weight and reduce friction. And we have been remarkably clever at making them better and better ever since they were invented. But I especially love the idea of how we have broadened the concept of bearings into a diverse family of inventions, including non-contact bearings that hold something up or move it along through magnetic charge. Maybe ball bearings should be the official applied technology mascot of the pandemic recovery movement. Is what we want to do coming out of the pandemic supportive of what we value? Then it is by definition a load-bearing activity, idea, or hope. And friction reduction is a huge plus. As a religious community, we are concerned with forms of load bearing that are classically resistant to precise calculations. Think of what comes into your life bearing truth or hope, or of childbearing. There won't be equations to tell us precisely what we can endure for these blessings. What we have instead are spiritual practices that increase what we can bear to gain blessings and in the service of making our life a blessing. Practices like gratitude, generosity, humility, and compassion, just to name a few. Another way we find our bearings is to connect in mind, body, and spirit to what is beautiful in the world. And that's what I hope you took from what Morris shared this morning. Morris's travels to care for children in Africa, Sri Lanka, a Syrian refugee camp in Lebanon for Doctors Without Borders, or more recently, the Navajo Reservation in a time of pandemic, speak of several of the practices I named above, most notably compassion. But as you could hear so clearly, his passion really came through when he spoke of the beautiful setting he encountered on the reservation and the Navajo practices that plug into that. They celebrate in prayer, like his closing words about beauty, but also in daily rituals like entering their east-facing homes in a circular movement. The simple act of entering the home mimics traveling through the day and night to end up facing a new dawn. So paying renewed attention to our daily rituals and our worship rituals is part of finding our bearings as we come out of the extreme distancing phase of the pandemic. Intentionally doing beautiful things together can illuminate how we can support each other and our goals. That's what the flower communion is going to be all about. But we also need to find our bearings in the more common navigational sense. Bearing in this sense is a word describing your current relationship to your surroundings. How far And in what direction are you from where you were and where you want to be? Bearings are a much more universal idea than our idea of direction, which is earth-centered and grounded in cultural conventions about north and south poles and east and west. Bearing is based on a 360-degree concept that is not even tied to our planet. Every direction is a possible 0 degrees target for where you are headed. Every bearing can disclose a starting point or a goal. The challenge to find our bearings as the pandemic ends calls us to be as open-minded as possible in our thinking about where we are and where we want to go. It even implies that the bearings we seek include our location in dimensions of time as well as space. So it's no small thing for me to say, I'd like us to find our bearings as individuals and as a congregation. Now, knowing that, a lot of us have been talking about what, if anything, we can take for granted as we look forward to being together again. One path to finding our bearings recommended to us is to think of the pandemic as a traumatic experience for Unitarian Universalist congregations. I confess I have some qualms about this approach. The word trauma is widely bandied about with little agreement on exactly what we mean. It seems not just weird, but even a little shameful to me to hear the same word being used both for the impact of 4 centuries of slavery and post-slavery racial injustice of Black people, and for people emotionally worn down from 14 months of social distancing. Nevertheless, a lot of us see wisdom in the words of Reverend Sunshine J. Wolf, a transgender member of the UUA staff who consults with congregations in Western Pennsylvania and Ohio, and who advocates for pandemic trauma awareness. We've linked to Reverend Wolf's 9-minute video in several emails and blasts and other ways of communicating with you. But I'm going to talk about it here for a few minutes on the assumption that many of you have not yet clicked on those links and have not seen his prescription for how we should be thinking about things. Reverend Wolf advises that there will be members in every congregation for whom the pandemic has been traumatic. Many more have witnessed its traumatic impact firsthand, even if they have been spared, and it means something to be a witness to trauma. And I'm going to add, many of us are painfully aware that there is a good chance the pandemic will once again get worse with a vengeance. Across most of the world, vaccination rates are so low that new variants can easily emerge and spread rapidly. 2 things follow from that. We should expect to see common signs of trauma at CVUUS. For example, people who have experienced other forms of trauma in the past and who are triggered by something in our environment as we resume meeting together that seems hard for them to understand how it could be, hard for us to understand how it could be so painful. And some people may have what seem to be distorted senses of time, be depressed or lack energy, all signs of trauma. We can expect that some of us will feel a rush to get back to, quote, normal as soon as possible, and then extreme disappointment when the new normal doesn't turn out to be what we remember Sunday mornings were. If we are truly to live out our intention to be inclusive, we will need to be trauma sensitive and trauma adaptive for a long time. Now, of course, this isn't just a congregational problem. Just this morning, I was reading a piece by a writer named Marin Kogan, who described walking with her husband on a narrow sidewalk in her Washington, D.C. neighborhood. This was after the CDC had advised that mask wearing was no longer necessary in such situations. So she was startled when a man coming toward them raised his mask and sprinted into the street and past them, and didn't stop until he reached the more wide open spaces at the end of the block. Later, she tried to imagine all of the unusual circumstances that might explain his fearful reaction. But in the end, she said, we have to accept that we will encounter a lot of reactions we don't understand. She herself has experienced unexplained panic attacks during Zoom meetings, The doctors have been able to find no medical reason for them. A lot of us are not as okay with the lingering impacts of the pandemic as we think we are. The writer's advice was, we don't need to understand someone's behavior to respect it. And that's advice we should take with us into the reopening of CVUUS. And all Reverend Wolf advises, it may take some congregations up to 10 years to fully heal. And we are advised to take our time reopening. Don't try to do too much too soon. Gentle reopening is the mantra for the day. Even before we saw this video, many of us had intuited and discussed our way towards its recommendation that we be gentle with each other. It's why we saved the joyful occasion of the flower communion next month as our first moment to experiment with having a large number of us gather. It's why that experimenting is going to come with a big dose of, it's perfectly okay if you need to hang back from some parts of this, or even all of it. Some of us will be wearing masks when it's not required to send reassuring signals to each other that we are gathering in a spirit of love for those who feel most vulnerable, as well as joy that we can be together again. The gentle reopening goal is also why we are stressing that flower communion is not a grand reopening to be followed by regular services. We will be using the summer to find our bearings with a variety of ways to offer Sunday morning worship. Some Sundays may offer opportunities for a substantial number of people to be in the sanctuary this summer, but some may be largely or entirely remote screenings of worship at other UU churches. Our dream is to have open doors for all and full-scale religious education programming for children underway by the end of September. We want to continue to offer remote participation opportunities through Zoom and YouTube, but it may take quite a while for us to acquire and master the technology that will provide connections for remote viewers as visually and acoustically satisfying as what we have today. Remember, we have spent more than a year creating services entirely geared toward reaching us in our homes with no concern for how they would look at CVUUS. Soon, we will be trying to do two very different forms of sharing at the same time. A minister I know said thinking about this challenge has been like coming indoors from a long day of snowshoeing or skiing. And there's a certain amount of pain you didn't feel before that comes as you warm up. I think that's a very good metaphor for us to remember. But as we find our bearings, I hope you will join me in sharing Jane Hirschfield's prayer in our reading, to be surprised. I wanted to be surprised is the name of the poem. And far more importantly, I hope we will take heart in the clear truth that the first line beyond that title is, to such a request, the world is obliging. There are abundant surprising ways for us to stumble, but even more abundant reasons to trust the spirit of love-sustaining life in which we are held. I love that when Hirschfield added up the surprises the world had offered up, she was embarrassed that she had not anticipated making so many errors she only recognized when their impact was appearing on the faces of others. I know that feeling well. Most of us do. That's why Reinhold Niebuhr rings so true when he insists that forgiveness is the final form of love. But it's so comforting that Hirschfield also sees that she underestimated that so much of the world continues to chug along despite the errors and the losses. Or as she puts it, we forget to be as amazed as we should that day after day, please still means please, and good morning is still understood as good morning. I want us to find the post-pandemic bearings that take us to places like this poet found herself, to places where life's surprises on balance keep calling us toward justice, compassion, and beauty. May we travel those paths gently with a joyful resolve to accompany and support each other. Blessed be still means blessed be. Amen.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Thank you, Ronnie. Enter, rejoice, and come into the spirit of this day and to the spirit of this week. Whether you are traveling or preparing to travel or finding your bearings in place at home among the community of people who love you so well, may it indeed be a joyful week for you, and see you again next Sunday, if not sooner. Blessed be.